Hello, Year 11. This is a quick podcast on the analysis of Bruce Dawes' poem Weapons Training. It was requested by some students in my class, so I'm sharing with everybody so everyone can use it for their upcoming assessment task. Okay, the first thing we notice with this poem, before we even start reading, is it starts with the word and. As we know, and is a conjunction. So if you were going to write about this in your assessment task, you would say that it starts with a conjunction and. And the technique is called in media res. I-N, new word, M-E-D-I-A, new word, R-E-S. And what it means is to start in the middle of things. So we're thrown straight into the action as if the conversation had already started prior to the poem being written. And it serves as a point to grab our attention as readers or listeners to the poem. And it says, and when I say eyes right, I want to hear those eyeballs click and the gentle pitter patter of falling dandruff. You there, what's the matter? Why are you looking at me? Are you a queer? The next thing we notice is we go through 4 lines of text before we get to the very first punctuation mark, which is this question mark just here. We actually have a flow on of ideas. So it says, when I say eyes right, I want to hear those eyeballs click. So we have ID 1 that ends here, and then the gentle pitter patter of falling dandruff. And the other ID here, you there, what's the matter? You could put in punctuation there. And why are you looking at me? More punctuation required. Are you a queer? So the absence of that punctuation is just this relentless flowing on of ideas coming out of the personas or in the persona's voice. It's then important that at this moment where we have queer, that we have the question mark appear and we have a pause. It's a pause for breath because it's very hard to say those lines without breathing. And it also accentuates the word queer. The word queer in this context of the poem is a very much an insulting word, and it's the first time that the recipient in the poem is being humiliated. It then goes on, look to your front. If you had one more brain, it'd be lonely. What are you laughing at? You in the back row with the unsightly fat between your elephant ears. Open that drain you call a mine and listen. Remember first the cockpit drill when you go down. Be sure the old crown jewels are safely tucked away. And it goes on. And it is devoid of that punctuation. And it's just a bombardment, and you can use that as a technique as well, this bombardment of abuse at the soldiers who were there for their defense training. So the poem itself is in the style of what we call a dramatic monologue, because there are pauses in there to take a breath, and it gives us insight into the way the mind of the persona, in this case the drill sergeant, is working. Also, just in these early stages, you have this ironic use of words here, gentle pitter-patter, pitter-patter being onomatopoeia, this gentle sound, but it's used ironically with the idea of the eyeballs clicking, and he wants to be able to hear the dandruff falling. So it becomes quite aggressive in its use. Also, with those lines, gentle pitter patter, if you listen to it carefully, gentle pitter patter, you have that repetition of the T sound and the short, crisp vowel sounds, gentle pitter patter, and the P's are almost spat out, and you have this. It's almost like the sound of the clicking of weapons being put together. Okay, so then it moves on. So we have, and when I say eyes right, I want to hear those eyeballs click and the gentle pitter-patter of falling dandruff. You there, what's the matter? Why are you looking at me? Are you queer? Look to your front. If you had one more brain, it'd be lonely. What are you laughing at? You in the back row with the unsightly fat between your elephant ears. Open that drain you call a mine and listen. Remember first the cockpit drill when you go down. Be sure the old crown jewels are safely tucked away. What could be more distressing than to hold off with a burst from your trusty weapon, a mob of the little yellows? And then it goes on, but here, at this point here, when we get to the cockpit drill and tuck away the old crown jewels, this is where we start to get to the jux of what this poem is about, and the reason for this abuse and this training. So, firstly, you have the lewd sexual innuendo by the use of cockpit drill. We know we're referring to an aeroplane, but there is also the sexual innuendo and the connotation there as well. And then, of course, the old crown jewels safely tucked away. Um, and we know what that means as well. The terms are used in the Australian vernacular, which gives them a level of crudeness about them. And it says, what could be more distressing than to hold off with a burst from your trusty weapon a mob of the little yellows, only to find back home because of your position, your chances of turning the key in the ignition considerably reduced. And then we have a pause. We have another question mark just here. And what you have going on is, firstly, by saying that there is this use here of the phrase, the key in the ignition, firstly, it gives us an idea that there is an opportunity for the soldiers to come home. So it is not completely futile at this point. It also juxtaposes, though, the idea of life and death. And when we scroll down, it comes in as well, um, uh, down here when it says, that's right, grab and check the magazine, man. It's not a woman's tit, worse luck, or you'd be set too late, you nit. The two lines up here and down here do contrast life and death, and this idea that through by using these sexual references, um, we do have an idea of reproduction, and this idea that not going to be able to turn the key in the ignition. Again, it's vernacular, but it is giving us an idea that when they return home, there might be a level of impotence that is going to stop that life cycle from continuing. This is confirmed when we have, that's right, grab and check the magazine, man. It's not a woman's tit. Again, breastfeeding is this life-giving source. It's what nourishes a child, and yet it is juxtaposed against the magazine man. The magazine being the weapons, the ammunition of the weapon. And so where they should be at home with their partners, with their spouses, and enjoying marriage and living a beautiful life with children and all this. They're not. They're holding a weapon, and the two are likened together. And one gives us a level of impotence, and this is what is coming out in this poem. Now, if you go back up here, we've got distressing then to hold off with a burst from your trusty weapon, a mob of the little yellows. This is the first time we have a reference to the enemy, and it is written in a way that is racist and confrontational, and it is to dehumanize the enemy. So when the defense, when the men are going through their defense training, by having this constant reference to the enemy as the little yellows and to Charlie's being the Viet Cong, it's this racist connotation towards the enemy that dehumanizes them, which is going to make it easier for the defense forces to kill them when they need to, and to shoot at them. So it in a way, it degrades the enemy, and it shows the dehumanization within war, which is something that you can link also to Homecoming, the poem Homecoming. There's also this section here. It says, all right, now suppose for the sake of argument you've got a number one blockage and a brand new pack of Charlies. It's like he's lost their interest for a moment, and he's trying to get them back on track. Contextually, we know that many Australians were conscripted into the Vietnam War, and were not there by choice, and they're learning to be soldiers ready to go to war. And so he has to keep pulling them back on track to remind them of what they're doing and why they're there. But once he has got them back on track, we then have this repetition of you, you, and it goes on, you down here, your, you've. it keeps bringing it back to this language that is bringing the soldier in. It repeats the pattern that has occurred in the earlier part of the poem. So it is constant, you were doing this, you were doing this, and then he distracts them a bit and then says, all right, now let's get back on track, and it's back to that you as well. Okay, then as it goes on, he's got you've copped the bloody lot, just like I said. So he's using again that Australian vernacular, and here he has the word tripes, the tripes around your neck, which is slang for guts. So this idea that they've got intestines, stomach around their neck, it is using colloquial language or Australian vernacular slang to show the bloodiness of war. The it's very it's quite visual in its imagery there, and it's heightened by saying the bloody lot, just like I said. So even though bloody lot is Australian slang, he's using that word to impact with the word tripes to show the bloodiness of war. And then, of course, he goes on with, you've copped the bloody lot, just like I said, and you know what you are. You're dead, dead, dead. The bluntness of those final lines and the crudeness is to show, for me, it shows the futility of war. And you have that repetition of the dead also emphasizes that the drill sergeant is trying to get the message across them. If you don't follow the training, if you don't do what's required, then you're going to die. But it is also to get this idea of fear, his fear for his men, and also to get into their heads that as we said, the racist ideas against the enemy, and also they're learning to fear and hate the enemy and the outcome of this war. Um, but he's not being malicious in the way he's saying this. He's just stating the facts. And the way it is said gives us that further idea of the futility of war and the dehumanization of war that takes place. They are not a singular person, it is a group of men all being included in the you and the your. So ultimately, I think for me, what we're seeing in this poem is the men are the weapon. They're not being set out to train with the weapon, but they become the weapon. And then, as we see when we compare it to the poem Homecoming, they are just numbers. They are just there to shoot and be shot at, and they will either come home alive but impotent, or they will come home dead. So, and that idea of coming home alive but impotent or coming home dead is what really highlights the idea that this poem is about the futility of war. Um, it is heightened by the use of the crude language and the vernacular, the lack of punctuation, the fact that there is no rhyming scheme to the poem, and all of these are techniques that you can refer to in your assessment tasks. And the other thing is, as I said, I think you can link this to life cycle in a way where we have this contrast or this juxtaposition of life and death in this poem. The use of, as I said, of the sexual references and the lewd and crude way that they are done does give that juxtaposition between life and death, and the fact that with war, ultimately life becomes wasted. And even though this poem doesn't quite get to the same level as Homecoming does with the waste of life, we are seeing that right from the beginning, that futility is there.